This is a beginning point. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. I got the meaning, and I got to write it down, because I don't want to forget it.
Just win, baby.
Just win, baby. It's gymnastic with a tiny tumbler. Yeah, that's you. Welcome back to the Gold Jacket Podcast. Proudly sponsored by Manscaped, the very best and below the waist men's grooming products and apparel used by over 400 men worldwide. And we are pumped to be hosting the contest with our new Manscaped promo code. If you use the promo code Gold Jacket, that's Gold Jacket, to receive 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. The first 10 people to do so and send us proof of the code of usage will be entered into a draw for a free Gold Jacket shirt courtesy of Veridian Global. But enough about that. I am your host, Gymnastic. If you haven't already been able to find that out, you can find me on Twitter at Gold Jacket Quarter or QBs. I am joined, as always, by the other host of this show, Connor Donald. He can be found on Twitter at Connor10. We are proud members of the True North Fantasy Football Network. Make sure to check out the entire network on Twitter at True North FFB. YouTube, if you're watching right now, we thank you at the TNFF Network. And on the internet at TrueNorthFFB.com, where you can find articles, rankings, podcast streams, and so much more. Welcome back, because we are back, and we are going to dive in from what we learned from the championship round. We're going to revisit our Dynasty rankings at each position, this week being the wide receivers, and we're going to rock some doubles. But first up, what is up, Connor?
Not much, man. I'm excited to be back, man. I mean, it feels like it hasn't been very long, and that's probably because it hasn't been very long. We recorded Saturday night after not being able to record last Tuesday. So, I mean, that was another fun weekend, another great championship weekend put on by the NFL. And obviously, some crazy things came out of it with Tom Brady being retired officially this morning. Finally, that drama can be put to rest. So another quarterback position opens up. I think this is going to be a pretty wild offseason. So we're going to have so much to talk about, and I cannot wait to dive into it all. But let's dive right into it. And with what did we learn? Sponsored by Manscaped. For the remainder of the playoffs, we're going to dive into key player stats and other fantasy relevant things we saw in each round, like we've been doing the past couple weeks. But first, roses are red, violets are blue. Don't let a wild pube wreck you. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and our sponsors at Manscaped are here for you with the best tools to get your balls ready for the special occasion. Let me propose something. Let's make February 13th a national holiday as National Shave Your Balls Day. Who's with me? I think this is one holiday that men and women can get behind. And of course, we can totally get behind it because it's also the Super Bowl. So who's going to complain about doubling down on such a prestigious national holiday? This Valentine's Day, it's time to join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped, the leaders in below the waist grooming, with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com right now and use code GOLDJACKET for 20% off plus free shipping. Join Cupid and shoot your arrow with Manscaped this Valentine's Day. Jim, can you tell the listeners what you learned from using the wonderful Performance Package 4.0 that might help men alike this Valentine's Day?
PG, because I got some tiny tumblers with me. I can tell you that it has been a fantastic product that I am extremely happy to be a part of and using myself personally. And I can also guarantee you that the wife is definitely happy with it as well. Nobody wants to be taming lions down there, boys. So get your game in order there. Get the chair back there, get the lion's whip, and tame that lion's mane there. Get it going. It's a fantastic product. You can use it in the shower. It's technical difficulties. We're rocking though. It's absolutely fantastic.
I love it. Perfect. That's all you need to hear. That should be all you need to hear to get yourself ready for Valentine's Day with Manscaped and with the Gold Jacket podcast. Now on to the conference championship weekend and what we learned for the fantasy offseason and maybe for the 2022 season for fantasy football. Jim, let's start out with you and let's start out with what you learned from that Bengals and Chiefs game. I know it's tough to bring that topic up already, but Jim, what did you learn for fantasy? We'll avoid the heartbreak.
Well, you can talk about the heartbreak too. It's ironic that it was 13 seconds in, eh? Either way, what I learned if you play an IDP, defense definitely matters. You can make a stop in the overtime, so don't be complaining about those overtime rules. So that's one thing. I learned Joe Mixon's still deadly dangerous. I learned that if you're going to double team Jamar Chase, which it looks like a lot of teams are going to be doing, a nice sneaky option in the play game is going to be everyone might be leaning towards T. Higgins, and T. Higgins is a nice piece. But the one thing that I was noticing is on key third downs and go-to situations that Joe Burrow had very comfortable going to Tyler Boyd in key down situations. Sneaky piece. Probably a little bit even cheaper than T. Higgins. T. Higgins is probably cheap enough as it is for what I like on his price point. Both of them can be nice. I think T. Higgins could be a nice solid wide receiver 2. Wide receiver 3. We're playing in 3 wide receiver leagues deep. Tyler Boyd is a fantastic flex play / bye week filler, especially for the price cost acquisition. Listen, boys, you can't start all your studs, right? Like you're not going to have an entire lineup and bench of all just these monster studs. There got to be some players, fillers as we like to call them, somewhere sitting on your rosters. And Tyler Boyd is a perfect example of a filler that is beyond his price point acquisition in the production you're going to get.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that a lot of people at that point in a draft are probably going to be staring down other teams' wide receiver 2s, or maybe looking at other teams' wide receiver 1, like a really bad team's wide receiver 1, and just trusting that type of production. But I mean, we've talked in a couple other group chats how important it is. Is it vitally important? We had the discussion about T. Higgins, AJ Brown in one of our discussions. Do you want the wide receiver 1 on a team that passes the ball about 10 less times per game than the wide receiver 2 on a team that passes about 10 more times per game and produces way more offense on it through the pass and attack, like the Cincinnati Bengals and T. Higgins? Because we were talking about, do you want to pay up for AJ Brown, or do you just want to pass on AJ Brown and maybe you have T. Higgins come up? And they finished very close from a points per game perspective, but I also understand where people are coming from. Is he was injured and all this stuff, but to the same point, the opportunity is never going to be bountiful in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill throwing the ball and King Henry in the backfield and stuff. So that was definitely something we talked about. So then you have to measure out the fact when you're staring down, when you're drafting outside the top 24, when you're in the 25 to 36 or 25 to 48 range, do you want to go the third best option in a high volume passing offense? Or do you want to go with the team's 2 or really bad offense's potential 1? So definitely a good point on the Tyler Boyd aspect there, I think, because I think there's some really good return on investment and return on value there. Almost reminiscent of like Adam Thielen, in my opinion, from this past season. Adam Thielen had a really good season when he was able to stay healthy and stay on the field, which is always a big question mark with Adam Thielen. And you probably got him as your wide receiver, your third, maybe your fourth wide receiver off the board. So it almost kind of reminds me of that situation. What I learned from that game is I'm having some serious concerns over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. and being able to draft him and being able to trust him in fantasy. I think he's been taking on a shared workload, as you can see, and he's been more effective. But obviously, when you're sharing nearly 50-50, probably less, it's more like 55, 45, 60, 40 because Jerick McKinnon's getting the passing down work. Not to say Jerick McKinnon's going to be back, but I think that they will take this as an example of what to do. Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably can't handle a full workload by himself, even if it's a limited workload. So they are going to bring in some support or a supporting cast next year in that running back room, and that worries me very much. I think that he will likely and rightfully end up in the running back dead zone, and it's feeling more and more like one of those trap running back dead zone players. And I hate it because he was my RB1 in that draft class. It was just the landing spot, man, the landing spot. And now the injuries and just everything's culminating in the skills there, but it just doesn't feel like the trust is there and the faith is there, which isn't going to equate to much for fantasy. You're muted. You're still muted. You're still muted.
Wow, I
there we go. We got it. We got it.
Double click the button. If you can tell, look at these eyes. You know what I was doing before the podcast. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Connor, man. I definitely have some concerns with CEH and his workload. You always wanted to be attached to that running back, that you're always aching to that Kansas City running back, whether it be the days of Christian Okoye or Larry Johnson or Priest Holmes or Jamal Charles. You just seem to be falling in love with it. And CH, along being reached at by the Chiefs with that draft capital, just screamed for the opportunity, but it's clear to see that he's not going to be the stable workhorse back. We've already been touting it and preaching it all season that we think the league is going to be way more RBBC, with probably 29 or 30 teams running that, and maybe only one or two having a true workhorse back, one of them probably being Tennessee. And we'll even see what they do with King Henry now that they've seen that they have a stable substitute in Deonte Foreman. That doesn't
Him as
really...
a Christian McCaffrey, Zeke.
Yeah.
Like, look at
You know
where
what I
those
mean? Like,
backfields, those were the guys
that's
you
what I'm
could
saying.
trust for your 20 opportunities, no problem a game. And now they're beginning to, well, Christian McCaffrey hasn't started to share the workload, but I think it's become crystal clear it's time to share that workload.
You even have Jonathan Taylor sharing the workloads with Naheem Hines and stealing opportunities that are frustrating owners week to week. The only one I really don't see, and it's going to be surprising because he showed up late in the game, and you might be calling him a Super Bowl champion in a few weeks, and that's Joe Mixon. Could be getting a lot of the lion's share of carries because he's been showing that he can handle that load. And with an offense, like we keep alluding to, that has three fantastic weapons in the passing game and a quarterback that keeps defenses honest, he can see a lot of touches to close out some games. He can be a sneaky workhorse back for some fantasy options.
Absolutely. Next up, San Francisco and whoever they played, the LA Rams. So mine is, man, get your Brandon Ayuk shares. I admitted I was wrong. I've admitted I was wrong on him a couple times. And you should have gotten in, and the rumors are already going. Jimmy Garoppolo is looking for a trade partner. Jimmy Garoppolo and the San Francisco 49ers are working together to find a new trade partner and get him out of San Francisco, because it's going to be the Trey Lance show next year. Trey Lance, I know he uses his legs. He's got that mobility. And I know from what we saw earlier in the season, you're probably sitting there and you're saying, why would I rush to get multiple, like the wide receiver 2 off the team or the third option behind Samuel and Kittle? Trust me, things are going to start to look up for San Francisco. I think that offense is going to look so much better next year. And just think about it like this. If you're Trey Lance, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. How do you get consistency? How do you get that ability to work really well with your receiving options? You just don't. because you're in, then you're out for 2 weeks, you're back in, you're out for 3 weeks. Like he just never got to get into a mojo and a flow. And now he gets a full off season with all these guys without Jimmy Garoppolo taking the first team snaps from him. And he's going to be the starting quarterback working with these guys. If there is anybody you want to share that experience with, you want Trey Lance and Brandon Ayuk. As much as I like Deebo Samuel, I feel like you can get Brandon Ayuk cheaper than Deebo Samuel. You can get Brandon Ayuk cheaper than probably George Kittle. So I would definitely be going for Brandon Ayuk because I think he'll be probably going, 18 to 24 range. And now Deebo's probably established himself as a top 12 wide receiver.
I absolutely like that take too, Connor, because I believe that talent is always going to get that opportunity, and the kid has definitely shown some talent. Obviously, Deebo has as well. We're going to see how that offense totally changes or keeps going the way it goes. I would imagine like you're still going to get Deebo touches in the backfield and manufacture a lot of touches, but I'm interested to see how this offense is rolling with a full Trey Lance weaponry. I'm sure if they were smart, they have a nice playbook that they didn't show anybody in the NFL that they were just rolling with in practice and fine tuning so they can unleash it week one or week two, and get it fine tuned by then next season. So yeah, I like it, and people are going to be sleeping on the kid too, right? Because of Deebo. And because of Kittle and because of Elijah Mitchell and whoever else that I believe the 49ers will probably end up drafting.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Elijah Mitchell, but Ayuk is likely going to be cheaper than Elijah Mitchell, depending on how people react to the whole situation and the whole circumstance of when he was healthy and what he put up in a per game average. Like he could be like the cheapest option on that offense, and he could be extremely effective. And he could be someone who you can easily lean on as being your wide receiver 2 or your flex.
Yep. He's going to be going in the range in that division's like Van Jefferson for the Rams, right? Where Van Jefferson's going to be the 4th option on the Rams. But I think Ayuk's going to get a lot more opportunities than Van Jefferson. I like Van Jefferson. I like Ayuk a lot more.
What about you? What did you take from that game for fantasy?
Oh, shit. For fantasy, man, Matt Stafford is a beast. I'll tell you that. He's a guy that is going to be solidified in my probably top 6 quarterbacks in fantasy going forward. He's when he kick dude balls, right? And now you're going to have Kupp, Woods, Beckham, Van Jefferson, Akers. It's going to be nice, man. I'm looking forward to this.
If they bring Beckham back, but even if they don't, you get Robert Woods back. It's a swap.
I think they're going to bring Beckham back.
They're probably going to try. Their goal is to bring Beckham and Von Miller back, but that should be interesting.
I don't know, man. I don't think there's going to be a lot of suitors for Beckham.
Could be true. Could be true. You don't want the drama. You don't want to deal with it. It was kind of like Antonio Brown. The only teams who dealt with him was the team that took Tom Brady, because Tom Brady really liked Antonio Brown. So definitely something.
Absolutely. Also, like Cam Akers again. Nice. Cam Akers again, looking fantastic for fantasy purposes. I have no problems throwing 1st-round picks and paying up for him again. Like I said earlier on the season,
he only got like 50 yards, but you can see the workload.
48 actually, Connor. 48. I had the over on a 59.5. He had 48.
So there you go. So he had 13 carries for 48 yards. Like he's seeing the touches. You can see
he had the shoulder problem, right?
Yeah, he did leave the game for a brief time there. So, like, know that you're going to get that.
But it wasn't Achilles related, so I'm happy with it. And again, I have no problems with paying up. He looked fantastic.
Oh, I think there's no question. There's no issues with the Achilles. I think he's going to be just fine. And you can tell Sean McVay wants to use him like a horse. I mean, we don't have Darrell Henderson in the picture, so we don't really know what it's going to look like. But I think it's become quite clear and obvious he's likely going to get a lot of touches out of the backfield. Maybe Henderson will get more of the looks in the passing game. I guess we'll have to see how things go in preseason and training camp as in regards to that when the time comes. Before we move into time to revisit and we look back into our rankings, a quick word from Veridian Global.
Here at the Gold Jacket Podcast, we take family very seriously. We know that family doesn't always stop at the bloodline. It's a word that ensures trust. It's a word that, well, around here, means that I know that I can count on you to have my back. Veridian Global is family. A family of the Fantasy Collective, and that is the exact reason Veridian Global will have your back. And I don't just mean literally covering your back in the best apparel they can possibly outfit you in. I mean at every step of the way, from finding the brand that fits you best to tracking your order to making sure you are fully satisfied at every step. With over 50 brands a part of the Fantasy Football Collective family, what are you waiting for? Join the family now. VeridianGlobal.com.
Love it, love it. Time to revisit, sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. Visit monkeyknifefight.com, sign up and use the promo code TNFF for a 100% deposit match up to $100. There is still one more football game left to go, touchdown dancing more or less, and other great prop games. Plus, they have a whole host of other prop games with so many other sports to check out in the football off season. But, Jim, let's take a look back at our top 24 wide receivers and kind of decipher where we missed, where we hit, and who we think will be our biggest risers and fallers next season. Jim, I think we both missed on probably the same guys. Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel being the two biggest.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely didn't have Cooper Kupp as the number one wide receiver
by
at
a
all.
landslide.
No, I had Stephon Diggs, and it was very, very close with Stephon. I had Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 18. Now, was wide receiver one part because of Robert Woods? You know, people might argue that, but I don't think so, because they had the competition playing Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham that ate up those those target shares, and Tyler Higbee as such. So
yeah, I think it definitely.
I think he was just dominant
with that. Yeah, he's just he. I think he saw over 10 targets in literally every game. He might have seen less than 10 once. I don't know. I'd have to look back at it, but I think it was over 10 in every single game. Like there's no sign of anyone really taking touches away from Cooper Kupp. That connection with Stafford was instantaneous and just stuck.
Absolutely. And the other thing that really stuck out when I was looking at some things for Cooper Kupp was his red zone targets, number one in the league with 42, with 30 catches. So that's monstrous. I didn't actually dive into it and look in the website to see how many of those were inside the 5, but just knowing that he had 42 inside the 20 is absolutely amazing. So, hey, look at that. I'm talking to myself. I got tumblers running around here, Connor, man. As you guys have been knowing, or as you know, Connor, but probably these other guys haven't known, I'm working a lot of hours at work last 2-3 days. So I've missed the tiny tumblers. Didn't even see him yesterday. So I'm kind of letting him have a little bit of free reign. Let him go a little bit buck wild there.
That's okay. That is okay. The other miss that I will talk about for myself was Ja'Marr Chase. I thought it would take longer than a year. I didn't think he would usurp Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins the way he did and completely take over and control the wide receiving room there. But clearly he is an absolute monster, and he's going to be, him and Justin Jefferson are likely going to lead the pack at the top of wide receiver rankings for many, many years to come. Unfortunately, I think Tyreek Hill's still going to remain number one on my list for a couple more years, but generally I think that Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase are going to be landing right up at the top of everybody's. But I thought it would take a little bit longer, like at least a year longer, for Ja'Marr Chase to really get into that offense to this extent, to like a 1,400 yard and well over 100 target extent. Any other misses you had?
Yeah, I had a huge miss with that. I had huge misses everywhere, man. You look at my top 24, it's a landmine. I had Allen Robinson up in the top 4.
Yeah, but come on, that's not fair. Who didn't have Allen Robinson in their top 24? I want someone to show me if they hear this. Show me on Twitter where in their rankings they had that.
I had Chris Godwin way too low. I had Bobby Woods 14 ahead of Cooper Kupp. Again, it was really close with Kupp and Woods, right? I had them splitting evenly, but like I didn't realize it was just that domination. Mike Evans was down there. I was really high on DK Metcalf, too high on Calvin Ridley. Now that is neither here nor there with the mental issues that are going on.
That one's definitely not. That one definitely we can't really talk too much into based on the situation that happened with Calvin Ridley. But I had him up there too. I had him at wide receiver 10. And I mean, it's tough to say what's going to happen. Obviously, there might be a change of scenery next year and he might get dealt. And if he decides to play football again, that'll shift things in the rankings. But he's still, to me, a top 24 wide receiver if he decides to come back into the NFL and play. So we weren't wrong on Calvin Ridley and Allen Robinson. It was just very unpredictable circumstances that came across for both of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, like I said, I got landmines everywhere through here, man. Everywhere through here.
What about hits? What about hits? Let's talk about hits.
Man, there's not too many.
For me, I had Devontae Adams finish a wide receiver 2. I had him at the wide receiver 2. Justin Jefferson finish a wide receiver 4. I had him at 6. Godwin finished 10. I had him at 12. And Lockett finished 22 and I had him at 24. So I was dead on. And then within like 2 either way with a couple of other guys. So I was kind of close in that regard, but there's definitely some misses and there will definitely be a lot of adjusting going on with my rankings, my dynasty rankings this off season. But what about you, Jim? Any notable hit you want to speak of?
No, there's not like, man, no. There's nothing that like, listen, if I've learned anything from this fantasy season, it is that you don't trust me with wide receivers. That's like the best thing that you can learn from a fantasy perspective, I think, is finding out where you're weak at and getting better at that, attacking those areas. And it doesn't necessarily mean you having to dive in yourself and figure out wide receivers, but just like dive in and figure out a guy that does know wide receivers. And if you're listening right now, there is a guy that I know that knows wide receivers pretty well, hits on them quite a lot, and that's Dynostradamus on Twitter. If you just want to go give him a go follow. The dude knows wide receivers. He's hit on a lot of wide receivers. And wide receivers that you can be smashing in the second round of rookie drafts too, which is of the utmost importance.
Definitely. I like that. Definitely a good one. Definitely a good follow. Risers, for me, obviously, Deebo Samuel is going to be a big riser this offseason. Deonte Johnson's definitely going to be moving up. I had him down at wide receiver 20. And Darnell Mooney, I had him outside. I had him close to 30. I definitely have him moving up because it's going to be a very different situation there in Chicago. Allen Robinson likely will not be back. I could see almost zero possibility of him going back. So I got Allen Robinson in that regard being out. So Darnell Mooney's probably going to be a pretty big riser and hopefully a full season of Justin Fields. And acclimating with each other in the offseason will really help next year with the new coaching staff and everything. So, yeah, those are 3 guys who I think all have big rising grades on this offseason. What about you, Jim?
For me, rising definitely is going to be Cooper Kupp rising up there. Justin Jefferson cemented himself in my top 5. I had him just for reference sake outside. I had him at 8. DK Metcalf's going to be one of my biggest fallers. And Deonte Johnson, I'm gonna be pushing up my ranks a little bit. Even though there might be uncertainty at quarterback, he's a guy that I still want to be buying up aggressively.
He's a target monster, though. So at the end of the day, that's kind of like the people who would fade Brandon Cooks because he's in an offense with Davis Mills or in an unknown situation with the quarterback. He's been able to produce in those situations, and I think Deonte Johnson will be that same way. It's just difficult to tell what they're going to do at the quarterback position, but obviously you know that those teams often will throw the football a lot. So there's a good chance Deonte Johnson is going to see just as many targets again, and hopefully he's able to be very effective with them. My biggest followers, Marquis Brown. I don't think he's going to continue to sustain once Lamar Jackson comes back. And hopefully him and Rashad Bateman start connecting, and then Mark Andrews in the picture, J.K. Dobbins back, Gus Edwards back. It's going to be a very different look offense from what he was working in this season. Terry McLaurin, unfortunately, I'm going to have as a faller. Huge question mark at quarterback there. And whereas we thought he could be someone who is not dependent upon the quarterback, I think this year proved it. He needs somewhat of a quarterback to be hitting him, and Taylor Heineke was not that answer at all. He was a major disappointment this season. And Cortland Sutton, I think I'm going to have fallen because I think the guys to own there would probably be Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick. I know that they gave the money to Sutton, but I mean, I love looking at hog rate, and which is how often you're targeted on a per snap basis. And Jerry Jeudy was the highest of all three of them. So for the people who are sitting there saying, oh, Jerry Jeudy's not the one to own, everybody else got paid, Jerry Jeudy's getting the scraps, I don't believe that. If they're targeting him at that rate, I think Jerry Jeudy is one of the ones to get on the low while you have a chance, because I think he's the one to own. I think Cortland Sutton seems like potentially the odd man out in that situation, despite the payment. So that's why I got his risers. You got any more risers you want to add?
No, again, by Jerry Jeudy, but he just screams like a trade candidate for me. If they're going to go after,
which is all the better, right? Because if somebody's going to trade for him, you would expect they're trading for him to really cement him in an offensive role.
Well, I think that it's more like like Denver's offering him for the quarterback in a package. Yeah. That's what I think. If they're going to go after an elite quarterback, like a Russell Wilson, an Aaron Rodgers, a Deshaun Watson, well, I guess you don't really have to go for Deshaun like that. But you know what I mean? Like something like that, then I see them putting up like a Jerry Jeudy because, again, I still think like the Aaron Rodgers deal, like Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton scream like his wide receivers.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing coming out of that circumstance is that there's a lot of people saying that they want it to be Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams going back, and then they'd send like Jeudy and a couple firsts or whatever. More than a couple firsts. You'd have to send a fair amount for that return. There's a lot of people who are speculating that the two of them will go together, and that would just be terrible for Cortland Sutton and really not great for. Well, I mean, I guess we don't know for sure because Aaron Rodgers never really had a great number two, but which one of those guys is he going to choose as the number two and target to that extent? Then there's just a major question mark there as well. But yeah, Jeudy seems like a buy. CeeDee Lamb seems like a buy. People are just getting hung up on shiny toys and poor performance. When you look at like Jamar Chase and you look at Justin Jefferson and how they've performed, and how there's always one guy coming in, one wide receiver every year who comes in. People are getting enamored with the shiny toy or the top dog in one class and forgetting about these guys like Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb who are suffering through weird circumstances that are hurting their fantasy value. But the skill's there, the potential's there, the ceiling is still very nice. So those are a couple guys that I really like because I know that people were talking smack about CeeDee Lamb as well after his disappointing performance when Dallas got eliminated. So any more risers you want to talk about?
No, Connor, you know what, man? I'm getting a little bit tired here, so I want to do something to pick me up. I want to do some double doubles.
Yes, sir. This is double wide receiver edition, sponsored by Trophy Smack. Make sure your fantasy league champion feels well respected and like a real world champion with Trophy Smack. Sure, the virtual sleeper trophy's cool. The confetti that comes down to celebrate your sleeper trophy and the money you win feels good in your wallet. But with over 1,000 customizable trophy combinations, championship belts, and rings to choose from, you can commemorate your league's champion in style. Use the promo code TNFF with your purchase and receive a free championship ring. That's trophysmack.com and promo code TNFF at checkout. For anyone who's never joined us for the double, welcome, and where the hell have you been? Basically, what we're asking here is which of two wide receivers finish in one after the other this season in per game average points with 5+ games played do you want for Dynasty? This one, man, there was some juicy ones. This was so much fun picking these out. I found it was the hardest time. I probably could have picked like 20 of them. We could do a whole episode. The first one, wide receiver 4, 19.3 fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 5, 18.8 fantasy points per game. Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase? Jim?
Man, so the LSU connection. At LSU, everybody and their mama wanted Jamar Chase. Nobody wanted Justin Jefferson. Just want to do the old Barry Horowitz. For those old WWF fans there, you know, remember Barry? Did the old pat in the back. It was Justin Jefferson for me, but that was that price of acquisition. Now, their price of acquisition is definitely leveled out to similar tides. Because the rising tide lifts all ships, and that tide has lifted both their ships to equal levels. So that being said, I want the stability in the quarterback, and I want the quarterback that has the instant connection, and I want the wide receiver with the bigger piece of the pie, or a bigger pie to get a piece of, is how I should end up putting it. And that to me screams all those aspects. Jamar Chase.
Agreed. Absolutely. I'm in the same boat as you. I mean, there's a lot of rumors going around about Kirk Cousins, and will he be dangled out there as trade bait with how aggressive this quarterback market's going to be, new regime in Minnesota. Yeah, I want to stick with the one who's going to have the nicer pie, the biggest piece of a nicer pie. And that's definitely Jamar Chase as well. That's who I would pick as well. Both are going to be absolute studs. And you're probably going to be sitting there with both of them on the board as probably the first wide receiver you choose in a draft. So that is probably a very real debate that a lot of people are going to have in startup drafts. Next up, wide receiver 7, 17.5 points per game. Wide receiver 8, 17.3 points per game. Deonte Johnson or Chris Godwin, Jim?
Man, this one is difficult. They're all difficult. No, you're not difficult. You're awesome. I gotta go with Chris Godwin, man. He has the opportunity to leave a team and be an alpha. I understand that could be a problem in most cases. But I think that either way, whether he stays or whether he goes, it's the same scenario for him because he's got a new quarterback in there. Even if they end up sticking with Kyle Trask, which hopefully for my sake they do because they got a few shares, and I liked Kyle Trask. It doesn't matter because I guarantee he wasn't getting that many Kyle Trask isn't getting that many first team reps with Tom Brady on the team with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Antonio Brown and Gronk. I'm sure he was playing with the Scotty Millers and the Tyler Johnsons and so forth like that. So either way, Godwin has a little bit of an adjustment, but Godwin's the type of wide receiver that I liked at Penn State. He got overshadowed by Saquon when he was playing with him. I liked him coming in. You had to wait a little bit, but he could play with a lot of different types of quarterbacks. And when I say types of quarterbacks, I mean levels of athleticism when it comes to the quarterback. Didn't play with very, very good quarterback play at Penn State. Definitely questionable play with Jameis Winston becoming, the first guy to do a 30 and 30. And then putting up elite numbers with with Tom Brady, but Tom Brady obviously made them all look elite. If you extrapolated Antonio Brown's numbers, he was right there. All three of those wide receivers on per game pace, on per game average, were right neck and neck with each other. There was no favoritism, but that's the type of, again, the elite level of quarterback play that he got to enjoy. So he's enjoyed all levels of quarterback play, and he's performed well on every level of it. So with that, I have to go with Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin, actually, I think all three of them I just checked were in the top 12 in fantasy points per game average, and Chris Godwin actually led the way. Chris Godwin was ahead of Antonio Brown and was ahead of Mike Evans, and that speaks volumes in my eyes. It's been a shame that the past couple of seasons have gone the way they've gone with, some injuries and issues like that, and I would agree with you. I think I'd have to go with Chris Godwin. Obviously, it comes with the skepticism of where does he go? What's going to happen? We don't want the Allen Robinson treatment where he goes somewheres and doesn't become a vital piece of that offense. But somebody's going to pay some big bucks for Chris Godwin, and they are going to use him. And they are going to use him a lot, I think. And there will be a lot of teams that would be lucky to get him in there as their alpha or 1A and 1B, however you want to put it. And obviously the QB question mark exists for Deonte Johnson, and the QB question mark would exist for Chris Godwin because we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, but he has shown some stellar play over the last 3 years, and that absolutely cannot go unnoticed and can't be denied. And he's done it with likely far less targets than Deonte Johnson. So he needs less volume to do it, and he makes the most with a bit less volume. So definitely going Chris Godwin there as well. Wide receiver 13, wide receiver 14, one at 15.7 fantasy points per game, the other at 15.5 fantasy points per game. That would be T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle. Jim, who you got?
Man, this one was also difficult. You can go with Jalen Waddle and say that he's an elite playmaker. Or on the other side of that coin, you can go with the fact that T. Higgins has the nice draft capital with him, obviously not as high as Jalen Waddle or Jamar Chase, his teammate, but he's eating at a bigger piece of a pie. So is a smaller slice of a bigger pie better than a bigger piece of a smaller pie? That's an argument that philosophers have been debating since the days of the sandal-toed philosophers in Greece. So better men than me have contemplated and are still contemplating. But for my sake, I would end up having to lean with T. Higgins. I might be a little bit biased there for having a little bit of a lot of signed memorabilia from him, but I'm leaning T.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a lot of question marks in Miami. Yeah, Jalen Waddle's going to be there, but Jalen Waddle also took advantage of the fact that their big money prove-it free agent was Will Fuller, and he literally, something happened to that thumb, and it ended up having him out for the rest of the whole season pretty much. I think he played like 2 games with Miami. So that was a big thing. Mike Gesicki's a free agent. Will Fuller's a free agent. Devontae Parker, I don't think is a free agent, but I don't think he's a huge threat. Miami Dolphins have the most salary cap in the NFL, if I remember correctly. So I think they're going to go out. They're going to spend. They're going to get some weapons for Tua if they believe Tua is the answer, or they may go out there and try and be in the quarterback market aggressively, just like everybody else, just like 10 other teams are going to be. So they at least they have the money to spend. They have the opportunity to bring specific names in. So to me, Jalen Waddle, I think he took advantage of a circumstance, took advantage of a situation, not to deny his skill. He's got rockets. He's a fast dude. He played super well. He stood out. But that offense could look very different. What are they going to do at running back? Their running back game was putrid, horrible, with Myles Gaskin and Malcolm Brown and Salvin Ahmed. They were so bad. So obviously they're going to address that. They're obviously going to address the offensive line. Probably look at the wide receiver room. Gesicki, like there's a lot of question marks in my eyes in Miami, and Jalen Waddle may end up losing some touches because those numbers were astronomical for targets and touches that he got. So all that to say, I'm going with T. Higgins as well. The pie's there. The proven workability is there. So I got to agree with you there, Jim.
I'd also be a little bit concerned now, too, with that whole Brian Flores deal. Not about the Giants and the Rooney Rule, but also those text messages apparently about paying his owner willing to be paying money to tank the season and losing games. That's another thing that has been surfacing around. So I don't really want anything to do with that Dolphins situation.
The good thing is there's probably not a lot of people that you have people within the Miami Dolphins because the running backs are pretty much useless. The only wide receiver worth really owning is Jalen Waddle, and Mike Gesicki. There's a good chance he's going to go and get paid and not be the tight end there next year. So there's a lot of people who probably don't even have Miami Dolphins people. It's just Jalen Waddle, and you kind of should be shaking in your boots a little bit because there's a lot to be answered there, I think. Wide receiver 34 and 35, 12.5 fantasy points per game, 12.2 fantasy points per game. We got Terry McLaurin and we got Darnell Mooney. Jim, who you got?
Who the hell would have thought beginning of the season these two cats would have been finishing neck and neck at the old finishing line there, but
at the bottom of wide receiver 3, nonetheless.
There they are. Jesus. I want to go with Darnell Mooney. I still think Terry McLaurin has a name value, and that's something that is definitely a true thing with the name bias. That's a true thing with fantasy players. Hold on to a name a little too long, even if they're slipping or the opportunity's not there if they're not slipping. You know what I mean? Like you said, he proved to not be the DeAndre Hopkins quarterback proof type wide receiver. He needed some level of wide receiver or level of quarterback to garner his game. And Tyler Heineke wasn't that. And it's not to say that the Washington is even going to get a quarterback that does do that for him going forward. So with that, Darnell Mooney, as you alluded to, Allen Robinson is probably leaving Chicago. New face in there, and the coaching staff and the front office. And just got to hope to God that if they're coming in, that they want to align Justin Fields for success going forward. So we can only hope that they're turning it around.
Yeah, this one was a good one because there's like major question marks around both teams and what's going to happen. I think the one constant there is that in Chicago, Darnell Mooney is likely the wide receiver 1. It seems like they're moving forward with that. And it doesn't matter who the quarterback's going to be. Terry McLaurin's clearly the wide receiver 1 in a putrid situation in Washington. If they bring Taylor Heineke back, which would be so shocking, well, then we could be in for some sorrow and disappointment with Terry McLaurin again. If they go and they draft, like a lot of people assume, maybe Kenny Pickett, maybe Carson Strong, Malik Willis, some of the names at the top of the board there, Matt Corral, then could things turn around potentially? And then you get the young quarterback in. But I mean, I think Terry McLaurin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's like 26 years old as well. Like he's kind of on the older end when you would think that he would be on the younger end of wide receivers based on only being in the league for 3 years. So I'm going to go with Darnell Mooney as well. I think he's proven, I mean, he can be head around the cost that we've seen as the floor, which I think this is a floor as a wide receiver 3. But I think there is an opportunity where he can be the wide receiver 2. Whereas Terry McLaurin, for namesake, there's still people saying, he's a wide receiver. Well, he was wide receiver 1 for a lot of people in their rankings last season. But he's a high-end wide receiver 2. He's got the wide receiver 1 ceiling. But the quarterback situation needs to be right for him. With Darnell Mooney, you're already seeing the floor with a terrible quarterback situation, with a terrible circumstance, sharing with Justin Fields and Andy Dalton. So if they continue to build and the offense builds around him, they get a good wide receiver 2 and stuff, and they figure out that situation. Yeah, I think Darnell Mooney can definitely outperform Terry McLaurin. I think the question marks are a bit less in Chicago than they are in Washington. Last but certainly not least, I had to do a triple on this one again. Rank the 3 wide receiver, 21, 22, 23, who all average 14.6 fantasy points per game. So rank them from your favorite to your least favorite. Marquis Brown, wide receiver 21. Mike Williams, wide receiver 22. And DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 23.
So this isn't as hard as people would actually assume for me, because it's really a toss-up for my who's going to be liked the most. We all know Marquise Brown's going to be number 3 for me. I just don't like him in that offense. I think that offense rolls behind the running backs, and Mark Andrews just had a little bit of a brain fart there, but that's okay. I think it's runs, through there a little bit better, and I like Rashad Bateman. So for me, it's between Mike Williams and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, for this, from a talent perspective, it's funny because they're the Clemson boys. And coming out, Mike Williams was actually supposed to be the better prospect. He was supposed to be the ultimate, right? Like coming out, he was like the ultimate guy. Then like the injuries happened, all this nonsense. So you want the proven production in DeAndre Hopkins, but he's aging, or do you want the potential that you've seen in Mike Williams?
And he's a free agent.
I was going to say, and the question marks that surround what color jersey he'll be wearing in 2022 going forward, because there's not really saying that the Chargers could even afford him to come back, or if he wants to come back. Like, you never know. So, man, I think I'm just going to go with DeAndre Hopkins there, tossing up. He's quarterback proof. He's proven it in Houston. Again, like we used him as an adjective there before describing a wide receiver or Terry McLaurin. He's not quarterback proof. He's not Hopkins-esque when it comes to that type of wide receiver. So he's got to be my number 1 out of these 3. Then it's going to be Mike Williams, just based on still having that hope for what he could have been coming in as that whole package. And then I'm not a fan of Marquise Brown, so it's Marquise Brown sitting 3.
Agreed. I'm going to have Marquise Brown at 3. I kind of alluded to it earlier in the episode, the fact that he's probably going to be one of my biggest fallers in my rankings based on where he finished this year. And that's largely for the fact that I kind of think he's kind of like Jalen Waddle. He's a byproduct of a very favorable situation that saw him need almost force-fed targets, because it was him and it was Mark Andrews. J.K. Dobbins wasn't there. Gus Edwards wasn't there. Lamar Jackson wasn't there for parts of the season. So that takes away what made them such a run-heavy offense. And then J.K. Dobbins would eat in on the passing game as well when healthy and when there. So those 3 guys, when they're coming back, that means they're going to start the ball probably won't be thrown as much, despite that they want Lamar Jackson to throw the ball more and they want to see more in that regard. But then he's got Rashad Bateman, who missed a few weeks there with his core injury. And then you got Mark Andrews, who's literally inhaling targets and became the tight end 1 this year. So to me, Marquise Brown's in a very weird situation. I think he was a byproduct of a very positive situation in his favor. So I have him at 3 as well. Mike Williams, I probably would put at 2 as well. Obviously, he had a really incredible season. How much of that is getting a ton of targets from Justin Herbert, who's willing to throw up that 50-50 ball, who's got the arm, who's willing to meet Mike Williams 20 yards down the field with a bomb. Like, there's no guarantees you're going to get that same thing with the next quarterback for Mike Williams. He's a true X receiver. He's a big boy. He wins in the contested catch situations, and not necessarily with his ability to create separation with speed or anything like that. So that's something that I don't necessarily love. And so I'd have DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins just needed to get right. He needed to take this time to get right, get whatever was wrong with him. He didn't want to be rushed back. That's why he didn't come back for the playoffs. That's why he didn't come back during the season when there was a lot of rumors swirling that he might. he needed to get right. He needed to get that ankle going in the right direction. And hopefully next year he's going to do really well. And I would assume one of Christian Kirk and AJ Green will not be back. So that, man, Hopkins is going to see about 120 targets, 130 targets like he's used to. And hopefully he can stay healthy because he's the one that you can trust to definitely produce massive numbers. We've seen it before. Hopefully his ankle gets 100% and we see the DeAndre Hopkins we're used to despite the age. Look at Mike Evans. Look at Keenan Allen. Age is just a number for some of these guys. But then you have Julio Jones on the flip side. So eventually it all comes crashing down. But for now, I would take DeAndre Hopkins over Mike Williams and Marquis Brown in this circumstance. Anything you want to add before we exit out, Jim?
Man, how sad's AJ Green right now? Sticks it out with that franchise and he leaves and they're on their way to the Super Bowl.
I know, man, the heartbreak, the pure. I saw everyone tweeting about it and posting memes about it. I was like, damn, that didn't even click right away for me, but that must hurt. That must just hurt. Oh, man. It happens, though. He went to an organization that looked to be trending the right way, and then some things kind of hit the wall there early in the playoffs. So who knows where AJ Green will end up next year. But it'll be interesting. Fun off season ahead. So I want to take the time to thank everybody here for listening and supporting. Make sure you rate, you review, like, or subscribe wherever you listen or watch. Shout out to all the sponsors: Manscaped, Veridian Global, Trophy Smack, and Monkey Knife Fight. And make sure you check out the contest that we have with Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com, use the promo code GOLDJACKET, get your 20% off the order and your free shipping, and send us proof that you did it, and you'll be entered into a draw. The first 10 people will be entered into a draw for a chance to win a free Gold Jacket t-shirt courtesy of Veridian Global. Of course, right above Jim's head is where you can find the True North Fantasy Football crew, TrueNorthFFB.com, at TrueNorthFFB on Twitter, and the TNFF Network on YouTube, where you may be watching us right now or will be watching us after we're live. And Jim at Gold Jacket QBs and myself at Connor10TEN on Twitter, if you haven't already found us. But for now, that is it. And next week, we are going to be diving into the tight ends. And, geez, it's going to be a weird week. Maybe we'll talk about what we learned from the Pro Bowl, but we probably won't learn very much from that. So,
nope, we're not talking Pro Bowl, Connor. We're not talking Pro Bowl. We're talking mom jeans, tight ends. That's what we're doing.
Absolutely. It'll be a shorter episode talking about tight ends next week. So we will see you all next Tuesday.